Hey, so today I'll be talking about the two artifact sets, Viridescent Venerer and Archaic Petra. Two artifact support sets for two support-based elements, and how one is a staple set from day one all the way until now, and how one inevitably failed, worse than the time I took the AP exam for statistics in my junior year of high school, and got a 1. So, as we all know, Viridescent is a set that is still widely used since release on almost every single Anemo unit, minus the main DPSs of course, such as Shao and Scaramouche. Its 2-piece set gives a 15% Anemo damage bonus to the equipped character, while the 4-piece increases swirl damage by 60% and decreases the elemental resistance of opponents to the element that was swirled onto them by 40% for 10 seconds. And the character with this set equipped must swirl when they're on field. Pretty simple, right? Swirl either Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo with Anemo on enemies, and they get a pretty massive decrease in that resistance for a short duration. However, there are a few more hidden advantages with the set. Swirl does a bit of AoE damage, and if another opponent gets hit by that, they will also experience the same resistance shred. And this decrease in resistance can have more than one element take advantage of this effect. This can happen when the character with Viridescent swirls multiple elements onto the enemies, and it doesn't even have to be at the same time, so the timers are independent. Now, as for Archaic Petra, it's also pretty simple as well. Its 2-piece effect gives a 50% geo damage bonus to the equipped character, and the 4-piece effect states that when the character with this artifact set obtains a crystallized shard, all party members gain a 35% damage bonus for that specific corresponding element. Only one type of elemental bonus can be obtained this way. Now, at base explanation of how they work, both Viridescent and Archaic Petra seem on pretty level ground. Their 2-piece effects are literally mathematically equivalent. However, for the 4-piece effects, Viridescent does seem to have a bit of an advantage. Viridescent can capitalize on the fact that it can decrease resistances simultaneously, while Archaic Petra can only give elemental damage bonuses for one element at a time. And Viridescent, given that it shreds resistance, actually gives more damage in the long run than Archaic Petra, just straight up giving damage bonuses. I can't really crunch the numbers, but I do have 2 links in the description down below to help explain it. However, this isn't just bad on paper, it also translated pretty badly when applied to characters in game. At the beginning of Genshin, we had 4 animal characters available to us: Venti, Jean, Sucrose, and Animal Traveler. And as for the Geo characters, we had Ningguang and Noelle. Venti could easily sweep up enemies in his burst, applying the debuff. Sucrose was the Catalyst, who could be used as a perfect Anemo driver and constantly shredded resistance. Jean was a great hero support who had a short cooldown on her skill, and Traveler could sweep enemies away and pull them in depending on which attack was used. All these characters were support characters, quote-unquote, who could quickly utilize the effect and then just swap out. As for Geo, Ningguang was, and still is, a main DPS, meaning that the 4-piece of Archaic Petra would actually be a disservice to her damage. The most she would use from the set was the 2-piece, giving her some extra Geo damage bonus, and then benefiting from another 2-piece attack or noblesse. And as for Noelle, she seemed like a main DPS healer support, who would also benefit from a different artifact set, that being Gladiator's Finale in the earlier version of the game. As we look into the next few updates, we would get Zhongli as the next Geo unit at the beginning of December, and despite the glaring issues that he had during his first release, he did seem like the best contender for this set at first. He would summon his shields, and then hopefully cause the crystallized reaction, and then swap out to deal damage. But come around late April, 1.5 dropped, and the tenacity of the Millilith artifact set was essentially tailor-made for Zhongli. In the same update as Zhongli, Albedo also dropped, but after about a year of discourse debating whether it was better to have him on Archaic Petra as a sub-DPS, or Tenacity of the Millilith as a support, Husk of Opulent Dreams was deemed his best in slot when Update 2.3 was released. Noelle also had this set become her best in slot as well, since she gained more DPS output with Husk than Gladiators, and as for the last 3 Geo units, Hito, Goro, and Yunjin, they pretty much all followed suit, taking on Husk as well. Having other artifact sets being better suited wasn't the only issue. There was also the glaring issue of how Archaic Petra's intended playstyle translated into gameplay. The character with Archaic Petra equipped would have to crystallize and then pick up the shard before the bonus could be obtained. This presented an issue in actually going to the right shard and picking it up. This seems like an easy task, but in the heat of battle it might be difficult, with enemies pushing you around, trying to dodge attacks, and the time wasted to get the shard. With Viridescent, all you would have to do was swirl once and immediately swap off. It was extremely efficient to pull off, and not to mention, most Anemo characters could crowd control, pulling enemies in order to pull off the resistance shred. It didn't require chasing down crystalline shards like a bunch of headless chickens. And as for the character who could use this set, after all the Geo units were released, Archaic Petra's best candidate at that point was probably Yunjin. Her elemental skill, Opening Flourish, had an animation after cast where she would step forward, grabbing the crystallized shards she would create when cast. And while this did have a practical use and did work in some rotations, it became an issue in the teams she would mainly be put in, mainly in Yoimiya Vape Double Geo, Hu Tao Vape Double Geo, and Ayato-based teams. In order to proc Archaic Petra properly, Yunjin would have to crystallize Pyro for the first two aforementioned teams. However, this is essentially impossible. If you were to use Yoimiya's team, you would shield with Zhongli, then use Xingqiu's burst and skill, then follow Yunjin's burst and skill as well, and finally go into Yoimiya's elemental skill to fire normal attacks. But if done this way, Yunjin can't crystallize with Pyro, essentially wasting Archaic Petra's effect. Even if you use Yoimiya's burst at the start of the rotation, or do a charge attack over summoning Zhongli's shield, there still may be no guarantee that you will have crystallized with Yoimiya's burst mark proccing, not to mention the other issue of maybe not having enough energy for Yoimiya to proc Shimenawa if that is your artifact set of choice on her. The same issues arise for Hu Tao. If you don't have Albedo for Vape Double Geo team, you can throw Yunjin in to help do some damage. You might as well, since she's doing normal attacks with every charge attack she does. But creating a Pyro Crystallize is pretty much impossible, and if you are able to pull it off, it will just mess up the rotation and have a pretty significant DPS drop. And as for Ayato, it does work the best, given that his burst provides massive coverage of Hydra damage and application. Additionally, his skill uptime does fall under the 10-second buff Archaic Petra provides. But to build Yunjin and Archaic to benefit only one character seems like you're trying too hard to force it to happen. Remember, the clothes fit us, not the other way around. There's also another parallel we all have to look at here. Viridescent is the Anemo support set, while DPC, or also known as Desert Pavilion Chronicle, is the Anemo main DPS set. This was headlined with Scaramouche's release. Xiao has his own set with Vermilion Hereafter, but even he can still make use of DPC, and Hazo can also use it pretty well. And supports like Venti, Sayu, Sucrose, etc. could use the Viridescent set. Geo, Archaic Petra is a support set, and Husk seemed like it was intended to be the Geo main DPS set. Going by this logic, Geo support should have used Archaic Petra, and DPSs should have used Husk. However, since almost all of the Geo units scale off of defense in some way, Husk became the no-brainer in maximalizing defense, meaning that Archaic Petra was pretty much obsolete, given that Geo units of all roles could benefit from Husk as long as they needed defense, which was pretty much everyone except for Ningguang and Zhongli. And the last bit of why Archaic Petra doesn't work is because of the direction that Geo is going overall as an element. Geo units all seem pretty well immersed in the mono-elemental mindset. Archaic Petra is meant, and was meant, to buff either Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, or Electro, but when almost all of the Geo units want to focus on working within their own element, it becomes extremely difficult to integrate that in. And you know, just thinking about it, I just wonder if there will be any need for Archaic Petra in the future. It's been almost a year and a half since a new Geo character has been released, the last one being Yunjin back in January of 2022. People in the Genshin community have been asking Hoyo to release some Geo units that would work with other elements, and are not so streamlined into their own. And since it's now the element with the least amount of characters, there's bound to be a few more that Hoyo is willing to drip market. So yeah, thanks for enjoying the video everyone, and you already know what button to press if you want to see more on a regular basis. And if you have something to say, I can only hope that it's nice. Thank you, bye!